So for anybody who's just joining, I just want to say again, welcome. My name is Amanda Varian. I'm the lead of the research training programs in the Office of Research Trainees at UHN. And we are pleased to offer this workshop in partnership with the wonderful people at McCann Health and Caudex. Now, before we start, I just wanted to mention that next Monday, the ORT is launching a survey to get feedback from all UHN research trainees and staff on how they are doing in terms of their wellness and support. We really appreciate your support in providing us this feedback so that we can improve the policies and practices at UHN to help improve your experience. So look out for our emails that'll come out in the next 2 weeks with the survey link. Next, I want to start this session by first acknowledging the land on which UHN operates. There has been a UHN hospital on this land since 1829. Long before that, Indigenous people were its stewards. They, as their descendants, and we at UHN do now, learned, shared knowledge, and healed each other. Ontario is covered by 46 territorial treaties and agreements with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Regardless of where we sit today, we owe much to the peoples that have called this land home. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work here. We remember and honor the legacy of the peoples who have been here before us and all who work to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real. I would like to invite you to join me in taking a moment to reflect on the land that you are on. Thank you. So the ORT is committed to ensuring a mutually respectful and welcoming learning environment in all ORT operations and events, and prohibits any forms of harassment and discrimination. We appreciate everyone abiding by the code of conduct that we shared with the event information. And we also ask that you hold all questions until the end. We'll have a question and answer portion of the event where we'll ask you to put your questions for the speakers in the chat, and we'll present them to the speakers. The webinar will be recorded and the recording will be sent to everyone who registered. So with that, we can get started. So we're so excited to have 3 fantastic speakers today that are going to talk about medical communications. I'm going to kick it off with our first speaker, Dr. Stephanie Heyraud. After completing a PhD in cell biology, Stephanie joined a lab in the Lunenfeld Tenenbaum Research Institute at Mount Sinai in Toronto for a 4-year postdoc. Since she left the bench almost 10 years ago, she has been working in medical communications in various roles, including patient and medical education, scientific event organization, and training development. Along the way, she furthered her education with a certificate in adult learning and specialized in learning strategy. We're grateful for Stephanie for coming here to share her experiences.
And all is said. Can you hear me well? So I don't know if you guys already want to send questions to the chat and what more I can tell, because yeah, that was me in a nutshell. It was, I think for me, it was an easy transition to medcoms, because what I liked at the bench was really talk about science and plan the science rather than doing it itself. So when I had an opportunity to literally cross over the university avenue and start working at Sick Kids in their patient education programs, that was really just an easy transition. Then I kind of missed the science a little too much, because really it's a difficult task to explain the science and diseases and medicine in simple terms, but really accurately, so the parents could take care of their kids correctly. That is a difficult task, but I was missing the hard science. And so I started looking for a job in more the more traditional medical communications field. And we can discuss what this is later. And then, after that, I've been walking my way through a lot of different functions within MedComs. And that is mostly working with pharmaceutical companies to help them either educate their staff, educate doctors and healthcare providers to their treatments, and help them organize scientific events. I want to say that the continuing theme for me and all of this was really the education part, whether it being parents or the staff or even doctors. If you're not really trained on how to do it properly, I think we all sat through lectures that were terrible because the lecturer wasn't really keen on teaching very well. So if it's not well done, then it's super hard to learn, super hard to sit through trainings and e-learnings. So I went back online, actually, on online school with Humber, and got a certificate in adult learning. And that gave me all the principles, the guiding principles to design good training so that they're engaging, and most importantly, they enhance performance. So that was what I've been doing in the past almost 10 years.
Great, thank you. And as a reminder, people can feel free to share any questions you have for Stephanie in the chat. Next, we are so lucky to have Dr. Trang Au here. So Dr. Trang Hong Au completed a doctorate in pharmacy and a master's degree in public health in the area of epidemiology. Before starting in medical communications, she worked in academia and as a clinical pharmacist, specializing in hematology and oncology. She has always been interested in medical communication and how this transpires among healthcare providers and patients. Dr. Au thinks that it is important to communicate well, especially with the abundance of data and information that is now available. Thank you so much, Trang, for coming and speaking.
Oh, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. So I've been fortunate to find Caudex and to work in med communications. As Amanda said, I was, tenured faculty. I wasn't at the bench like Stephanie, but it was more clinical care. And for family reasons, we relocated, and the practice model where I'm presently at is very different than the environment I trained in. But the details aside, what you should take from that is that, circumstances change, and it's important to be flexible. And medical communications, I have found, is very rewarding. It allows me to practice my science skills, my cognitive thinking, my critical thinking, my writing, my attention to detail. And I have this theory that everyone who comes into MedComs was secretly a MedComs or a communications lover in some part of their prior life. And you bring that strength when you join the business. So my current role is an associate medical writer. It's essentially an entry-level position, despite the doctoral and the tenured. There's still a lot to learn in the business. And I joined about 6-7 months ago. I've been part of a training program called Fuel, and Gaby will go over the details of that. But I can certainly say that it has done, the program has done a great job in orienting me to what I do on a daily basis. There's definitely a learning curve. Things that I thought, I'm done. I did that, 5-6 years ago. I'm sort of doing them again, but in a different context. And I'm always challenged to think about the science in a different way because I'm communicating it now to a different audience. I work on the commercial side. and on two very different projects, but that also allows flexibility in what I do in the actual tasks. So it's never boring. It's fast paced. So there are some, late evenings, but I enjoy what I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
So I'd love to present a question to both of you. We can start with Stephanie. So what does your day-to-day look like in your position?
So have been in Trainees in the past. Sorry, there's echo and it's really hard. Okay, thanks. So I started as a writer. So my job was to write every day, but now I'm more of a supervisor role. I manage the team. I connect with the clients and make sure that we understand their needs and we deliver correctly. So I want to say my day-to-day isn't super exciting. I mostly attend meetings, strategize, decides who does what and when according to their workloads. I review budgets and scope of work to make sure that we plan enough money to cover for the project. But the exciting part is I also get to sit in meetings with clients where they strategize their products and development of products and how they're going to commercialize it and all the campaigns of promotional campaigns and education campaigns. So that's the part that is interesting. So long story short, I mostly write emails, mostly sit in meetings, but I interact with a lot of folks, which is great. That's my day to day.
Amazing.
I don't write anymore.
That's okay. That's good. It kind of shows you a little bit more of the career progression as well of how the role changes over time, which is great for all people to understand. Trang, do you want to give your perspective of what your day-to-day looks like?
Sure. So I'm on the other end, probably where Stephanie was, several years ago. I do a lot of writing. But I want to explain that writing doesn't necessarily translate into I'm writing like a 10-page paper every day. It's it's not quite like that. I could, for example, be developing a slide deck that is showing new data from a long-term extension study. And it's tricky because we have to accurately present the data in an unbiased way. It has to get through approval from a client's regulatory or legal committee, and then go on to FDA samplings. And, a lot of these slide decks are also put out into the field where physicians are seeing them, medical science liaisons are using them as tools to facilitate discussion. So obviously we want our work to be error-free. We want it to be accurate. But the other piece that I get really excited about is the creative component. Just last week, I was on with the studio department, and I was trying to work with them to figure out how to show data beyond a bar graph. And that's actually really fun. It sounds really geeky, but when you've seen enough bar graphs and line graphs, you start to think, there's got to be another way to do this. And it was really fun because we came up with an idea to quote unquote grow columns from the x-axis in a short animation. So I think that's where being part of medical communications, that bridge where you have scientific integrity, and you have creativity makes it really fun. So yeah, that's kind of a variation of my day.
I love that. I love the blend of using the science and your kind of passion and creativity and using it to be productive in different ways. And I love that because so many people have so many different passions, and it's great to find a career that gets to put together your training with your outside passions, which I think is great. What would you say are the main skills or the top skills that you think are necessary for your roles or in the career of medical communications? Obviously, writing is going to be one of them, but Trang, I'll ask you first.
Oh, sure. I wasn't sure.
Sorry.
Well, ironically, communication, because there are so many, um, there are so many specialized departments. You've got folks who are so good at coding. You've got folks who are so good at visualization. Others that are really have an eye for editorial. Others who are, creating the science. And you've got to communicate and coordinate all of a particular project to meet a timeline, to meet a deliverable. So I think being organized, communicating, and knowing when to sort of say, hey, we are really in a jam here, because you're working with a team. And I think those two skills, organization and communication, are really critical.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And on top of that, I would say now with, now looking back, don't take any feedback personally. So be very resilient, because you can put your best foot forward and then the client doesn't like it, but it's not because you're not good at your job. It's just because the client has an idea and it wasn't what you proposed. So yeah, I think as a master's students, or after a master's program or a PhD program, you already have the skills that are necessary. First, understand the science, being able to deal with a lot of data and sort through what matters. So I think these are a key. But what we need to learn when we get out of a lab is collaboration, because you're not working on your own. And then it's funny because I have a direct report who's a postdoc and also starting the fuel program like you, Tran. I never hear from him. He's like on his own. I never know what he's doing. And it's not because he doesn't want to communicate, it's because it's not the culture in a lab, right? You just do your own things. You don't, you communicate with your PI whenever you have a trouble or you get in trouble. But otherwise, I never hear from him. So I'm calling him the neglected child, because I forget to check in with him. But yeah, collaboration is not just on you, as Trang said. It's just a lot of people with our skills, and we need to work all together. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's great advice for people also to remember to advocate for yourself and speak up when you need it, because there's always people that are willing to help. One more question before we go to questions from the audience, and everyone who's attending here, feel free to continue to add questions for both speakers in the chat. But I wanted to ask, what advice would you give to graduate students and postdocs that are interested in medical communications? Or what advice did you find useful or would you have liked to have when you were first getting started? And this time I'll start with Stephanie. Yeah, that's an excellent question. At the time, I didn't even know it existed. I didn't even know it was a career opportunity. I want to say attend those career events like this one. Reach out to other medical communications professionals to ask them how they got there, what it's like working in their companies, and then apply to job postings. Especially nowadays, the industry is booming, so they are recruiting like crazy. I'm not going to talk about us. Gaby will talk about us. Also seize any opportunity to write. So if you volunteer to write a grant, volunteer to write a paper, go do some science outreach, and get exposed to other things than what's in the lab.
Yeah, I would add to Stephanie's list. I mean, all really valid and good recommendations. I think it's easy when you're first starting out to put too much emphasis in a label. Oh, you're a XYZ, and maybe based on what you've read, or maybe you talk to one other person, you think that person does that kind of job. But if you take the time to really ask somebody, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? What gets you up in the morning? Do you dread going to work? I think that really says a lot about like what they actually do, regardless of their title. And I would just encourage, you guys to think through that, and not be too quick to say, oh, that's not for me. Because even when you enter, let's say, medical communications, there are a lot of different avenues. And even as a medical writer, I'm on a commercial account, but you could be on a publications account, and that's a whole different experience. So yeah, lots and lots of variety.
Especially too, that talks about only one company, but there's lots of different companies and every experience might be different. So if you don't like your experience at the first company, it could be because of the culture, the way they run things there, and it could be useful to try something out as well.
Absolutely.
So we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So we have one question for Stephanie. How did taking an adult learning course help you in your role at Caudex, or was it for your role at Caudex?
That wasn't for Caudex. Caudex is my third agency. But I actually started this course while I was still at Sick Kids. So it was just, it just opens up a whole new world, because we're so science-driven, evidence-driven. We don't really think about the learners. We think about the content. We think about the knowledge, the nice to have. I want to know all the data. But when you put your shoes in the shoes of the, you put yourself, in the shoes of the learner, you realize, oh, wow, that's a dread. I don't want to sit for 45 minutes in front of my computer to learn something. It's never going to stick. So it helps me develop better content. But then from a personal perspective, it definitely opened a lot of doors, because that made me different. That was the cherry on top, because I was like all the other PhDs turned medical writers, but I knew a little bit more than the others.
Great. The next question is about how to prepare to apply for a job in medical communications. And maybe this is a great time to go back and talk a little bit about the Future Leaders program at McCann, and talk about the opportunities there. So Trang, did you want to describe your experience with that program and a little bit more information about that, or Gaby, if you'd like?
Sure. So the FUEL program is comprehensive, and because it's covered, a lot of the training is through webinars and seminars, but you are assigned a buddy whom you can always check in with throughout the onboarding process. You always have, a manager. It's a little bit more formal relationship, but just as valuable in terms of, the questions you can ask. There is definitely, the nuts and bolts of any job. Timesheets and logging in and various platforms you have to know. That's just any job that, you go for will have that. And then I think what's special about FUEL is the community feel to it. When you are hired, you're usually hired as part of a group, and those are your buddies also that you move through with. It's not always at the same time. For example, you may not be always watching the same seminar or training at the same time, but there are social events that you gather for. You can always chat with each other on the internal messaging system. You're always learning, you're always exchanging information. So that, I think, is also part of the training of FUEL.
you're on mute.
Yes, it was
I
bound
need-
to happen at some point.
I need to sign. I saw a client who actually have a sign. And so they don't even bother saying you're on mute. They just show the sign. I think it was genius.
Yeah, it happens every time.
Yeah. If I may add on to, so I didn't go through the fuel program because I joined Caudex at a more senior level, but I've never seen that before. I think Caudex has put together this program where you're onboarding with virtually no experience, and they train you, but not in 2 weeks like crazy, and then you're thrown in the deep end and fend for yourself. I believe it's 3 months. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And there's an actual curriculum you go through, and everyone makes sure that you're exposed to different projects, so you kind of learn. You have a really good foundation, so you can grow as a professional. And I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, and to your point, Stephanie, it is approximately 3 months, but it's not this defined 3 months. It may be heavy the first 2-3 weeks because again, you're learning so much, and then you may do a little bit of account work or client work, and so you get to apply what you're learning, and then you may do a little bit other training. So it's never boring, that's for sure.
That's awesome. And a great way for people who are new to the field to really be part of the community and to get trained, because that first job can feel really intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I'd love to introduce Gaby. So Gaby Cortes is going to tell us a little bit more about the application process for the fuel program. Gaby resides in New York City and works as a talent acquisition partner for McCann Health Medical Communications, where she focuses primarily on North American recruitment. Prior to that, she got her start in recruiting as a talent acquisition specialist at an ad tech company, where she recruited for a variety of roles, including client services, strategy, and operations. Gaby received a degree from Loyola University, Maryland in Baltimore, where she studied global studies and international business. Thanks, Gaby.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone. So I'm Gaby. So I've been at McCann Health for a couple of months, and it's actually my first time recruiting in medical communications. So it's also been a big learning experience for me. And I can say I've been very well supported and have learned so much in the time I've already been here. But yeah, Fuel really is a great program. And I kind of want to give an overview of McCann Health Medical Communications, because I'm sure you're hearing that company and also Caudex. So I can also explain that relationship. So McCann Health MedComs is made up of 4 agencies. So that's Caudex, CMC Connect, CMC Affinity, and Complete Health Vision. And we're about a little over 550 globally across our agencies and our shared services team. And most of our team is based in the UK, US, and Canada. And Caudex actually has an office in Toronto. So we definitely have been growing our Canadian presence as well for that agency. And right now we're working with 20 of the top 26 pharma companies. So we have lots going on here. Definitely lots of exciting work, to explore here. And so Fuel, as we had mentioned, is future experts and leaders. And yeah, it's really an early careers program. We've already hired about, I believe over 70 people just this year, and really anticipate that number to double next year. So we're really going to be hiring quite frequently throughout the year. And we actually have applications open as well right now. And so our typical interview process for Fuel, we have a couple of roles, but specifically for North America, we mainly hire for associate medical writers and for associate account executives. So that's for our client services team. So that's also another avenue that's open if someone wants to be a little bit more, client facing, work more in project management and billing. That's also a great opportunity, and we hire frequently for that role as well. So I'm actually going to share my email with everyone, and also our HR email that you can always apply directly to with your CV or resume and a cover letter, as well as the actual job posting. So I just share that in the chat. So we do have the role open right now, and we're hiring, for this year, early next year. So you can apply through the website or through email. And then if we see a fit, we schedule an initial call with a member from the talent or HR team. And then from there, we do a writing assessment. So it's short, and we usually give candidates about a week to complete that. And they get a brief, so they'll have all the information they need in order to complete it. Then we send that off to be marked. Once it's returned, And then based on those results, we move ahead with an interview. It usually actually consists of 2 team members from 2 different agencies, which is nice. So they get to learn a little bit more about more than just one. And then eventually, you know, all goes well, they do an actual, we call it an on-site assessment because it used to be in person, but now it's virtual. So they complete that right after the interview. It's returned within an hour. And then by then and everything is marked and we get the interview feedback, we're usually able to make an offer, and they'll down the line be aligned with one of the 4 agencies and of course place on the account and start going through the whole field training process as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for providing that information. I think it's so great to see that there's lots of positions opening in this field and that there's active positions right now. So I encourage everybody to check those out if you're excited by this workshop and it gets you excited to be part of this company and part of this field. I definitely recommend you check that out. So on a similar note, we have a question asking, how do you advise an applicant to prepare for medical writing tests, and which resources or websites can they find sample writing tests for practice?
So I would more say the brief usually prepares you well for it. So we don't really provide any information beforehand because everything in there should be adequate information for you to complete it. So we keep it a little bit vague until we get it because we want to see how they respond to the material and how they're actually able to write. But yeah, and I think that really, I think a lot of people, obviously the PhD programs are so writing heavy. I really think I've heard from a lot of applicants that prepares them well to do the assessment and training. I'm not sure if you have any other advice since, you know, you completed it semi recently.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There's a degree of, you know, let's see what the applicant does with the brief. It's nothing, I imagine you guys are in a doctoral program that you have not seen before. You've read a paper. You have some sense of the AMA guidelines. You have a sense of if there's a footnote under a table, the symbol that goes with the footnote should be somewhere in the table. It's nothing you haven't seen. So, you know, really, it should not be causing you stress. It really should be, oh, okay, I've seen this. It's just maybe the topic is about, I don't know, Nike shoes or something like that. You know, who knows what the topic could be, but the skill set is there. And they're just wanting to see, you know, how you respond to it.
Great. Thank you. We have a question for Gaby. What is the nature of the on-site assessment?
Yeah, it's very similar to the offsite that we send prior to the interview. It's just a little bit shorter. So we just ask that it's completed within an hour. So it has a little bit more of, you know, a timeline to it, I would say, than the week that we give. So they're very similar assessments.
Great. Trang, can you give us more of a discussion about what you've learned from the training program?
Sure, yeah. The training program is intended not just for per se writers. In my case, as I said, I'm on the commercial side. It's intended for all newcomers and all writers, and so it's pretty broad. You know, again, you're getting exposed to all the different platforms that everybody in the business uses. You're getting exposed to verbiage and certain language that is used. And how, you know, what we call SOP, standard operating procedures, are done so that you, once you start to do account work, you're familiar with some of the terms that are being used. I think that's a really big part of sort of getting your feet wet and starting to get settled. And as I said, you know, Field does that with an enormous amount of support. I never felt through my 2-3 months onboarding that I could not ask a question. And I ask a lot of questions, even little things like where do I go to access that? Because I'm on the intra page and I have no idea where to go. And your buddy will immediately respond and be like, oh yeah, that was a week ago we did that. Let me remind you. So it's fuel really, and it's also a ton of support.
That's amazing. And support is important for everyone throughout their development. So that's great. We have a question asking, what is the difference between medical writer and a care plan developer? I don't know if anybody can answer that.
So we don't hire any care plan developers here. So it would just be a medical writer or an associate account executive, as I mentioned, would be kind of the two avenues we hire for.
Awesome, thank you. So what are the career paths in medcoms? As in, what could be your career progression after your current position, Trang?
So I'm an associate medical writer. The next step up is a medical writer, then a senior medical writer. And then at that point, I believe, the path opens to two options. I could do what Stephanie is doing. And I think you can also veer more towards publications. And at that point, you've had 4 or 5 years, perhaps, or however many years experience, and you're able to make, I think, a much more informed decision about, where your next steps are. But aligned with what I was saying earlier, through that process, you always have your manager and your buddy to check in with, and you're looking ahead. What you're doing daily is contributing to that growth. And so, that's where I'm headed. That's where I hope to be in a couple years.
Great. How do you feel that medical communications has changed with COVID? Or has it changed at all with COVID?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it hasn't changed much. You always work remotely with, most of the time we work remotely with the clients because their headquarters are in the US or in Europe. So you're not going to travel for a meeting every week. Or most of the learning is delivered online. So the only thing that's scaled back a little bit are the meetings that are now happening online. But it's a trend that I guess a lot of people like. So now we're working towards hybrid modalities of delivery of these meetings. So yeah, it hasn't changed much. And I also, so Caudex, I don't know if we mentioned that, but Caudex, McCann in general is very international. So we work with people, I'm in Canada, Trang is in New York, have a member of my team that are in the UK. So, and now South Africa. So it's very international. So we also work remotely, and I've always been used to that, even in previous agencies. So yeah, it hasn't changed much.
What do you think are the biggest challenges in your current role or in medical communications as a career?
That's a great question.
It's all great.
I guess I would venture to say keeping up. It's such a booming industry right now, and it makes sense. I mean, if you just go look at the literature on PubMed, right, and therapies and disease states, enormous. I mean, we have pharmacogenomics, we have so many, therapies coming out, and science is allowing those huge strides to be made. But we also have to be able to talk about, those developments, and whether that's physician to physician, or I should say healthcare provider to healthcare provider, healthcare provider to patient, there's a need for it.
Building off of that, you also mentioned that it is a very fast-paced position as well. Somebody's asking, how do you feel you have work-life balance, or do you find that there's a lot of work-life balance in the role?
Stephanie, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say at Caudex, they're really, really keen on keeping us, keeping our well-being up. And sorry. My son just sneaked in. Sorry. I was waiting for you. Sorry about that.
It's great to hear that they're very focused on well-being. Do you have any thoughts, Trang?
Yeah. I'm constantly being reminded, oh, it's okay, don't stress, but it's my nature. It's who I am. I like to work hard, and yes, I pull long hours, but it's not because someone is forcing me to. Please don't. I don't want you to have that impression. Everybody comes in with different personalities, My my mantra for is my work-life balance is not always in balance, but overall it's in pretty good balance. So, when there's a deliverable, the team pulls together, we get it done. And yeah, that might mean a couple of late hours, but there's a huge amount of satisfaction the next day when you share the positive feedback that a client is giving you. It was team effort. So yeah, it exists. And everyone finds that on their own. But it's a company definitely that promotes it. So, it's not a situation when you feel like you're being ground to the earth.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I was gonna provide pretty much the same answer. It's up to you to work your work-life balance. Some people work late, some don't. I think as long as you deliver good work, it's not a big deal. Yeah, and yesterday I worked late, but most of the time it's just I keep it a 9 to 5. Some people like to have a big break during the day. Yeah, I think it's manageable. Just want to say, if you find yourself in a position where the work-life balance and the workload isn't manageable, then maybe it's time for you to look for another position somewhere else.
Great advice. There's lots of people asking questions related to how you got your first jobs and whether it's through directly applying or whether in medical communications, there's a lot of emphasis on a hidden job market or networking and things like that.
So I watched Fuel on YouTube, and I was like, wow, this is great. It's sophisticated and they seem liberal and open-minded, and I applied. That was it, really. And I liked everyone I met, from folks in HR to the different agencies, it was great. And I took the writing assessments, etc. And here I am.
That's wonderful.
So for me, it was a mix of applying directly to jobs, leveraging LinkedIn a lot, and recruiters. I worked with one really good recruiter who got me my very first job in a outside of SICKIT, so in a real medcoms agency. And since then, and then once you get labeled as medical writers, then they come to pick you up. They try to poach you, especially nowadays. So, and yeah, rely on referrals.
Building off of that, somebody has asked about what kinds of job titles or things should you be searching on LinkedIn when you're looking for jobs in this field?
Medical writers. Yeah.
Any other tips for how you use LinkedIn?
I use LinkedIn with a Google job titles, so medical writers, whatever comes to mind, and then I search. Well, I used to, not anymore. I search on LinkedIn. People have this job title, and then if they're open to connecting with you, just extend a connection and ask them what they do and if it's interesting, and if by any chance they're looking for someone, or give you tips. And that's how I've leveraged LinkedIn.
Great. And it's a great reminder too that when you're adding people on LinkedIn, always make sure that you add a personal note to say why you're connecting with them, because it greatly increases the chance of them accepting you. And if you are not on LinkedIn or you need a refresher, please check out our video. I gave a workshop on LinkedIn profiles a couple of months ago, and it is always available on our YouTube site. So definitely check that out and make your LinkedIn profile good and learn some good tips. Sorry, Gabby, it looked like you wanted to add something.
No worries. Just wanted to get in there just from I think a recruiter perspective or talent acquisition, HR, kind of that field. I think definitely LinkedIn is a great tool to use. I think people kind of forget to, you can actually approach even recruiters on there. Personally, I'm always happy to answer any messages that come through. So I think anyone at McCann Health Medcoms would be more than happy to connect and, speak more about it. I will say it's not the same at every company. Some recruiters do get their inboxes flooded. So don't get discouraged if you don't, hear back from someone. It just might mean that they don't have time to tend to their inbox. But a lot of times if you go to a job posting, sometimes it shows a recruiter that actually posted it. And usually if they're visible, it's because they're open to having people, connect with them or just ask them questions. So even if you just want to send a quick message saying, hi, really interested in your company, and in this role, have a couple of questions. I just wanted to introduce myself since I applied. I think that's completely fine. I always welcome those messages, and going to events like this and networking can really go a long way. That's actually how I got my role. I interned for a holding company back when I was in school, and I didn't end up there right after college, but I stayed in contact with someone I met at McCann Health Medcoms, and years later when I was looking to move, I saw them post something on LinkedIn and I reached out. And that's how I got here. So it's definitely, I think, a great way, and taking down emails whenever you can. And I think people really are willing to help because they know how difficult the job market could be sometimes. But I mean, right now, Medcoms, if you're looking for a job in Medcoms, it's the time to apply. I can tell you we're really, we have so many vacancies at our company right now just because we're growing so much. And, I think it's really a good candidate market right now. So definitely a good time to be applying.
I love hearing that. That's so encouraging for everybody who's in the audience and who's looking for a new career. It's always great to hear that there's lots of positions. We have a question. It's something I'm interested in as well, is knowing, is there a difference between a PhD candidate and a master's candidate for your writing roles? Are these roles open to everyone, or do you prefer people with PhDs?
So I can jump in. So we're open to master's or PhD. Mm-hmm.
And I can say my writing colleagues have a mix. So it's great.
Awesome. So great to hear too, because so many people are also deciding whether they want to finish their master's or continue on to a PhD. Mm-hmm. And so it's good for them to know that this is a career that's open for both people. We have a couple of people have asked about if you know about any opportunities for internships or part-time or freelance positions that students can do while they're still in school.
So right now we don't have any internships, and I think it's just due to the fact we've been hiring so heavily for fuel. We've been mainly focusing on efforts on that. That could change in the future. I just know right now it's not an option. And when it comes to freelance, I think from time to time we do offer it, but anything that is open will be usually updated on our career site. So I would always say check there. You could always email our HR email as well, and we'll get back to you about that.
Well, from a student's perspective, and outside of Caudex, I would definitely look for freelance opportunities, because then you have some experience when you apply for a position. When you're out of school and you're applying for an actual job, then you'll have some experience, and then the writing assignment will not be as daunting.
Absolutely.
So I would not look for an internship. They can pay you.
Awesome. And are there any other positions, kinds of volunteer positions or things that you did during your grad degrees to build your writing portfolio that were helpful to you? Would you say that writing in a university newspaper or things like that, or having a blog post, would those kind of things help for a writing portfolio?
I would say so. Anything helps. I did a lot of science outreach throughout my PhD and my postdoc, and that was super helpful for my position at Sick Kids. And then obviously you write your thesis, you write grants application, that helps.
Yeah, I did an internship many years ago for a newsletter for a medical school. And so I was interviewing researchers and trying to take their dense what they're telling me, which is very science dense, and translate it into an article or a column where anybody who didn't know anything about their subject could read it and understand it. So it's a similar idea.
Great. I think it's always great to hear too what people can be doing right now, because sometimes they want to prepare before they get to the point where they're ready to start applying. And if people are ever interested in having an avenue to write things, please always feel free to reach out to me. We love for people to write pieces on workshops, such as the one today. You could write a summary that we could post on our website, or we also post articles of different things that trainees have written, including things like summaries of papers that have just come out and stuff like that. So if you're looking for more writing experience, please feel free to reach out to me. Sorry, if I can ask to just keep yourself on mute, please. Thank you. So we have another question asking, what was the hardest thing about the transition from academic work to a medical communications position?
For me, the hardest part was at 5:30, the admin assistant will go around the office and say, well, that's you're done, the day is done, instead of staying up until 7, 8 p.m. at night working like stupid. No, joke aside, it's what Trang say, it's really fast paced. Sometimes you just don't have time to think, you just crank content out, and that could be a little daunting, but then you get used to it, and then it's really enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you start something new, until you settle in, you always think, well, that's not how I did it in my prior life, right? There's always, your mind naturally just compares. But then as you settle into, I am actually done at 5 o'clock on Fridays. I actually have the weekends. If I plan my week accordingly, I don't have to, log in on the weekends. I rarely do. And it's just, in terms of the work-life balance, it's great switching from academia, because in academia, the list of things to do, it never stops. And the idea is that you're working all the time. And it's different here for sure.
Awesome. I think everybody in life wants more balance. So it's great to hear, especially for a lot of graduate students and postdocs who are working really hard in the lab. And, it never feels like there's an end in sight, exactly like you said, there's always more to do. So it's good to hear that once they're done, they can move on to a job that will provide them that more balance. That's great. That's everybody's dream. That was definitely my dream when I was in grad school, for sure. Well, with that, we've answered a lot of questions. We're so grateful for all of the advice that you've given us. Do any of you have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave the attendees with today?
I think just, be encouraged, go after what you want. Sometimes it'll take you a little while, but, have an open mind. It'll work out.
And yeah, and I want to add to that maybe medcoms is not your dream job, and you will find out when you're on the job, but it opens a lot of doors, especially in the pharma industry. And then even within medcoms, you don't have to be a writer forever. You can do other things, as Gaby said. You can go over to the account side where you manage more projects and budget, or you can work more in the strategic side. So there is a lot to be explored. It's just not you and your computer writing things all day long. There is a lot more to it.
Thank you so much. Gaby, any last thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I think just to echo what everyone said, and especially Steph, there is so many options that we have that we didn't even, get to touch upon, because we could really go on, I think, forever about the endless opportunities in medcoms. But yeah, I hope just people feel encouraged to, apply. And if they weren't considering this career field before, to definitely consider it. It's a great option and kind of a little bit different from the traditional path. And yeah, and I'm always happy to answer any questions, if anyone has any that maybe weren't answered about, vacancies we have, I'm happy to connect afterwards as well.
If I may, I just want to add one more thing. Right now, at least in medcoms, you've got the power because we need you. So apply, be bold, be polite, be respectful, but be bold. You're really worth it, man. You guys went through programs that trained you very well. So now just play your cards right and apply your jobs and connect with people, network. And that's going to happen for you for sure.
Awesome. Well, with that, I'd love to thank all three of our fantastic speakers for sharing your insights with us. I love the positive messaging of that you have the power and you can do this. And there is a lot of great options out there, but I hope you'll consider this career in medical communications. So if everybody can take a second we have a survey that we would love you to fill out. We'd love to get feedback on this event and just learn more about what other careers you'd like to hear about and what other programming you'd like to see. So feel free to take a second and fill that out now. We'll also send out the recording of this workshop tomorrow to everyone, as well as the survey again. So just in case anybody missed it or wants to review any of the great advice that was given today. So thank you so much. And we're so grateful that you all could attend. And thank you again to our wonderful speakers.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.